I'm going to be modeling how we can annotate text for different purposes. Okay, so first I'm going to start by reminding myself of why I am making these annotations. I am going to make these annotations or notes to help me identify the central idea and the supporting details, and that I will want to use to summarize information. All right, I've got it. I'm going to be looking at just the first paragraph of this text called The Space Race by Hannah Pang. So I'm going to start right away. In the late 1950s, the United States became very competitive and a space race began. Oh, that's an important phrase for me. So space race. So I am going to highlight space race. I'm going to choose to highlight it in yellow. I know this is important because it's the title of this text. I'm also going to underline the United States and Soviet Union because that tells me who is in the race. That tells me who is racing against each other. I want to make sure that it stands out from my highlighting. If you highlight everything, it becomes really hard to tell the difference between things. So I'm going to choose to underline the United States and the Soviet Union because that tells me who is running that race. The Soviet Union is what Russia used to be called, and I know that from my background information. It looks like these are the major players in the space race, so I'm going to add a quick note. I'm just going to literally write over here, I'm going to write that the space race is the US versus Russia. And I'm going to use that word Russia because that's easier for me to remember than the word Soviet Union. Let's see. Now I'm going to read the next line. So each wanted to be the first to put a man on the moon. So there's the goal of the space race. So I'm going to highlight this little section and write in the margin that this is the main goal. So each wanted to be the first to put a man on the moon. So I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to highlight that a different color because that tells me that purpose. So that the purpose or goal, and I'm going to make a little note here, man on moon first. And over here, I'm going to actually highlight this that same color so that I can remember more easily my thoughts on that information. Okay, next I'm going to read the next line. This was all going on during the time of the Cold War, when political relations between the United States and the Soviet Union were already difficult. So this looks like it's providing some context for me. It's giving me background information. So I'm going to look for important phrases. I'm going to underline Cold War. That seems like it's something that's really important that they are giving me that information. So I am going to underline that. I'm also going to underline political relations. So that gives me some idea about some more of that context, that it's political, and then it's saying that it's difficult. So I'm going to underline all three of those because those words or phrases are giving me key information about the background of this. And I'm going to write, those are context. And so I'm going to write that in the margins. I'm going to write those words, Cold War, political relations, and I'm going to put difficult. You might also, instead of underlining, you could also choose to maybe highlight these a different color. Remember that there's really no right or wrong way to annotate your text as long as you are keeping in mind the reason for why you are annotating. And if you remember, the reason that we had stated earlier was that we are looking for information when it comes to finding the central idea and supporting details and information that we will want to use in a summary. So I'm going to think about all of this information and think about, okay, so what do I think is that central idea? So I'm going to think it's about USA and Russia. It's about getting the first man on the moon. I know it's taking place during the Cold War. So I'm going to write my idea, my current running idea of what I think that the central idea of this is going to be about. So the central idea of this paragraph, I think, is at a time of, and I'm going to bring in that context, at a time of difficult political relations. I'm using those exact words from that context, political relations and difficult, in my central idea. I'm going to bring my players in, the United States. My other player is Russia. Began a space race. So I'm bringing in that term from our text. And then what was the goal of that space race? Oh yeah, that goal was to get the first man on the moon. This is one example of how you might go about annotating a paragraph. You're going to look for those important details. You're going to look for any times they're talking about purposes or goals, or when they are providing you with context information. At this point in time, I would then move on to working on paragraph number 2.